Welcome to the Children in Scotland podcast. In this episode, Jen Drummond, editor of Children in Scotland magazine, discusses its history, its aims, and, as it approaches its 200th edition, what's next for this flagship publication.
Welcome. You're listening to Catherine Bromley. I work in the communications team at Children in Scotland, and I'm here with Jennifer Drummond, editor of Children in Scotland magazine. Welcome, Jen. Maybe we could start with you telling us a little bit about the magazine and what it does, who it's for, what it brings together.
Absolutely. So Children in Scotland as an organisation was launched back in 1993, and it had the intention of representing the children's sector essentially as a bit of an umbrella body. The whole sort of concept was that children and families and those that worked with them had a representative voice when it came to policy making. So over the years, obviously, we've been around for nearly 30 years now. So the way we do that has changed and has evolved, but the kind of essential core values that it was built on are some of what we still have today. I think we have a really unique position in the sector in that we engage and bring together all the different elements. So it's right across the workforce, but also at every single level. We work with children and families directly, and a lot of our participation and engagement work and much of our activity right across the organisation is designed to support the professionals and the teams that work with children and families. And I think it's here really where the magazine plays a particularly crucial role. We know that the children's sector is wide and varied. The magazine provides, I think, a place on paper at the very least to bring the sector together, sharing knowledge, experience and good practice. In the current context, particularly under the cloud of COVID, I think we have a really important role more than ever in keeping people connected and helping to develop best practice. In terms of who it's for, it really genuinely is for everyone, everyone who has an interest in children's policy or the children's sector more broadly. I think part of our strength is that we have CEOs and MSPs who read the magazine or at least have access to the magazine, young people who are involved with some of our projects, and basically everybody in between.
Great. Jen, it's nearly 20 years since Children in Scotland magazine has been available, and it's now approaching its 200th edition. It's played a really big part, not only in tracking, but in shaping developments in policy and practice during that time, and crucially supporting progress in the children's sector. I wonder if you'd tell us a little bit about how the magazine has supported the sector in its time.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that the role that we play in kind of taking forward policy discussions and discussions across the sector, bringing all those people together is something that I am really, really proud of, and I think we all should be really proud of. I've always viewed the magazine very much as a vehicle for discussion. A lot of our readership share our views and positions on a lot of policy, but I think it's also really important that the magazine is seen as a tool and a contributor to any debate. We want to showcase credible arguments on both sides, not just the kind of stance that we have, and ultimately use that to make an informed decision about what the best route forward is. I think the magazine plays a key part in sharing our views with our members. Of course, that is, a large part of its role, and vice versa. It is about letting members share their views and their position on things as well, which obviously informs a lot of the work that we then do and the positions that we then take. And over the years, it has helped make the case for changes in the law to do with a lot of different things. There's too many to rattle off with our, as you said, nearly 200th edition. So there's quite a lot we've covered in the time that we've been doing this. But some of the big ones, certainly since I've been involved, are we've had discussions around the Children and Young People Scotland Act and kind of various elements of that, some of which maybe is a little bit more contentious. We've used it to make the case for raising the age of criminal responsibility. We've used it to talk about incorporation of the UNCRC, what that looks like, how that could be done, what the best way forward is. And then most recently, we've been quite an advocate of equal protection, and we've used the magazine in various stages throughout that campaign to promote why we support that. And obviously that's a law that was just recently come into force.
Yeah, absolutely. And ending period poverty as well. I think that's an issue we've supported in the magazine.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really nice to see some of those things develop. So we might run maybe a comment on why we're supporting something, why we're supporting maybe a legislation change, and then, maybe a few months later, or even sometimes, the following year, or even a couple of years down the line, there's maybe a bigger piece on campaigns that are working for change, and then eventually, hopefully, we're running a news piece saying that it's passed. So it's really nice for us as well, I think, to have that record of how we've been involved in tracking, as you say, tracking policy kind of as it's developing, and our role in that. I think it's probably also worth mentioning that we're obviously working on our most recent edition, which is the December-January issue, is entirely focused around sort of policy and practice change. It's our manifesto special. Our manifesto for 2021-26 was launched in November. So our magazine, the December-January magazine, focuses entirely on the calls that we've made in that. And it's been great, this particular issue. We have some great comments from organisations and individuals across the sector who are supporting our calls. And I think this edition is a particularly good example of how the magazine is being used, just in the way that we've been talking about.
Yeah. As in your time, 8 years as editor of Children in Scotland magazine, it must have been really challenging to have the full scope of the children's sector to represent in one unique publication. I wanted to ask you how you do that and what are the challenges in doing that?
Yes, I think it's definitely a big challenge. That's, for sure. We do have such a wide and varied membership and readership base that it is really difficult to ensure that there's something in there, for everyone. And I think especially when we've got to think about, some of the other factors that are at play. We're producing a magazine, but we do it, we produce bi-monthly, so it's every 2 months it comes out. So we do obviously have a production schedule that we have to stick to. Quite often we get sent time sensitive content, so that obviously needs to go in a particular issue. And there's also external factors to think about, so things like activity or developments, maybe at national level, that actually we would be a bit remiss not to include. So quite often the content stacks up. I'm never short of things to include. And I think it's interesting, we have in the past tried to explore various ways of kind of presenting the magazine and presenting all the things that we want to include. We've looked in the past at doing themed editions, but we did find that actually that was quite difficult, and it alienated sometimes some of our readership. So actually, the general feedback that we got from our readership and from our membership base was that the magazine worked best when it had, something that was maybe of direct relevance to them and their job, some articles that maybe looked at the children's sector more broadly, maybe some national policy developments, but also that there was something from maybe a different area of specialism, a different area of work, that we could maybe present some shared learning. So we've kind of decided that that's the best option. We do the odd kind of themed edition or special edition when it's something that's quite broad and it is relevant to everybody across the children's sector. So it's a little bit like putting together pieces of a jigsaw, I think. I know everything that needs to go in there. It's just getting it all in there and making it work.
Great. I wanted to ask, a big part of the magazine is how it provides a platform for young voices, and inviting young campaigners to contribute has always been a really big part of the magazine's remit. How does the magazine reflect Children in Scotland's commitment to meaningful participation and engagement with children and young people?
I think it's also quite interesting to note that the inviting young people to participate is actually quite not as a reasonably new thing for Children in Scotland. Historically we maybe weren't working directly with young people, so that's, I think, one of the ways that we have as an organisation, that's one of the ways that we have grown and developed and updated ourselves, I think. So I think ensuring that young people have the opportunity and the space to share their experiences and the recommendations of things that need to change, from their point of view, as the people who are experiencing it, is massively important. And we know our readership, we know the jobs they do and the responsibilities and power that a lot of them have. Ensuring children and young people have a voice on our pages, I think, really embraces and lives our commitment to be a conduit for them, to give them access to a space and people that can be difficult for young people otherwise to reach. In the last few years, we've actually worked on a number of projects with some really great young people who want to make their voices heard on a range of issues. We've got our advisory group, Changing Our World. We've got our inclusion ambassadors. There's the panel on Europe. there's so many more that the participation and engagement team, I think, could have a list as long as your arm. But I think, you know, how young people are really taking control of their futures, you know, being part of the decisions that are being made locally, nationally, internationally, that are going to impact them is actually really inspiring, I think. So, you know, we owe it to them to give the opportunity to speak. And I'm really pleased that the magazine can be a part of that.
Yeah, and it's a great, as you say, it's a great way to really put young people at the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your time as editor, okay, this is going to be a big question, but what's the most exciting moment for you, the moment you've been most proud of?
It's really hard to choose, actually. You know, there has been a lot going on. As you said, I've been editor for 8 years. I joined Children in Scotland in the second half of 2012. So I've seen it kind of go through a couple of facelifts, a couple of changes. We've rebranded, you know, and I think one of the things that I'm particularly proud of in terms of working on the magazine is how we've managed to develop it as its own entity. You know, it is now a kind of standalone, and it's very much part of Children in Scotland. It's very much part of our brand. It's you know, it's one of our kind of main membership offers. It's a huge output that we do. But I think it's great that it's managed to kind of stand on its own, and it's come to be recognised as a standalone magazine, which I think is great. I think there's probably, I don't know if I can choose a single moment that is something that I would, you know, that I can single out as kind of like the best. So I've kind of selected a few, if that's okay.
Okay.
So one of the ones that I was really pleased to do was we did an election special back in 2016 where we interviewed all of the party leaders, and that was done myself as editor, but also with colleagues in the communications team. I was afforded the interview with Nicola Sturgeon, so you know, I got to sit down with her and ask her some pretty pressing questions, actually, which was great. I think, you know, regardless of your political persuasion, I think as a journalist, getting to sit down with the leader of a country is you know, is
And how did
pretty
she come
good.
across in that interview?
She was just very considered, very genuine, I thought, and really willing to answer questions, which I think is key. You know, I think politicians are particularly good at evading questions that they don't want to answer. So, you know, we did have some that I think were probably a little bit uncomfortable, you know, particularly around sort of childcare provision and the extension of childcare, which, you know, even 4 years ago was an issue. And you know, she answered them, and that was great, and great for us to be able to secure that. I think, again, another one is another interview, but Bruce Adamson, who is the Children and Young People's Commissioner for Scotland, when he first came into post, which I think was 2017, we were one of the first publications to be afforded an interview with him, which was great, and again, a real testament to the quality of the magazine and the reputation that we have. Yeah. And I think what made that interview particularly special was that I interviewed him, but I interviewed him with a group of young people. So it was the young people who were asking the questions who really got a chance to sit down with the commissioner face to face and ask their own things. And I think, you know, it's quite telling that I think we'd allocated maybe about an hour, and I think it ran to about 2.5. So, you know, there was quite a lot to be discussed, and you know, quite a lot of questions being asked and a lot of discussion being had. But I think for me as well, that was maybe my first experience of working really closely with children and young people. You know, that's kind of usually the remit of our participation and engagement team. So for me to be able to kind of do something with them and have something to show for it, you know, that they can, the young people who were involved, I think there was about 4 or 5 young people who came to the interview and asked the question. So at the end of it, you know, they got the magazine that they had interviewed the Children's Commissioner in, which I think is you know, was really good. It was really nice to be able to facilitate that. And then the last one, I think, was one of the sort of issue highlights, I suppose, is the UNCRC issue that we did. So we did an issue in October 2019, which was all focused on the incorporation of the UNCRC. And it was a great addition, if I do say so myself. It was, you know, it showcased kind of some of the amazing work up and down the country that really embodied the very basic rights outlined in the UNCRC, the very kind of fundamentals of it. And it was great to be able to pull that together, to see on paper, and again, that was one of the things I had so many more examples than I had space to include, unfortunately. But reading through all of the examples that were sent in, for that one, we put the magazine together in a slightly different way, and we actually put out a sort of a call for examples, essentially, for people to kind of tell us if they had something they wanted to write about. And yeah, I think we ended up with about 50 or 60 examples, and unfortunately we could only pick a handful from that. But just the sheer kind of volume of what we got back was just, it was really amazing and quite heartwarming reading through it all, actually. And in that particular issue as well, the interview was with Dr. Nigel Cantwell, who is quite a big name in child rights policy. So, and he was actually a key contributor of to the UNCRC as it was being developed. So it was really interesting to have his take, 30 years on, what do you think of it? Somebody who was involved from the very beginning, what do you think of it? What does it look like now? What do you think of it now? Is it doing what it was intended to when the discussions were first had, 3 decades ago? So that was fascinating. And then I did say that was the last, but I've probably got one more, which was in 2018, the magazine was shortlisted for a publishing award at the PPA Scotland Awards, which is probably a personal highlight of mine, I think. To my knowledge, I don't think the magazine had been recognised in that kind of way before, and certainly not by a group of peers out with children in Scotland. So to have kind of others in the publishing industry recognise the value that it brings to the sector was a real kind of personal highlight, I think.
Completely, as you say, to get that recognition. I knew it would have been hard to choose one moment. So
I know. I tried really hard, but
until spring of this year, 2020, the magazine was available only in print and either through membership, part of our membership offer, or by subscription. Things changed a little bit in March of this year. And the magazine was obviously affected by that change. And I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about the different way to access the magazine now and how we've adapted during the pandemic.
So, as you say, usually kind of COVID, there was 3 ways to access the magazine, really. There was through full membership of Children in Scotland, where you then received a copy of the magazine as it was printed as part of your membership package. So that would be sent directly to your office or your home, whatever had been selected. There was also the option to take out an annual subscription, which was obviously the magazine only, and then you could also purchase one-off copies via the website. So if there was a particular issue that you wanted to read but maybe didn't want to commit to full membership or full subscription, then you could order individual copies, and we would usually have some ready in the office for anybody who chose that option. As you say, things had to quite dramatically change, as everybody else has had to do also, earlier this year. So I think, we are primarily a printed publication. That's what we are. That's what we've always been. So when COVID hit and obviously everything kind of, shut down, we had to pretty quickly determine what was going to be the best course of action to make sure that we were still in touch with our readership base, that we were still keeping in touch with our members. Obviously printing and mailing out the magazine was no longer a viable option for lots of reasons. So in the end, what we decided to do was accelerate our plans to explore digital. Digital had always been on the cards. It had always been something that we have kind of looked at how that would work in terms of the magazine, in terms of accessing it, in terms of producing it. But it was very much it was still a work in progress. It was something that we were kind of still developing, actually. So it really had to be, as I said, accelerated a little bit when when everything was shut down. So we published our first digital only edition in April on our new page suite platform. So we also took the decision to offer public access to the magazine. You know, as you said, it is a membership benefit. It's usually behind a sort of a membership wall, and you could maybe access the odd sort of free comment piece or article that we chose to share, but as a full publication, it was usually reserved for members. But at the moment, we kind of thought, it's a really difficult and challenging time, and I think that we have a lot to offer in the magazine, and the magazine has a lot to offer in terms of bringing people together, and I think that's more important now than ever. So we agreed to host it for free at the moment. We do have plans to return to print. We know that digital isn't necessarily for everyone, and it isn't always accessible for everyone, and I think people all could have different ways of how they like to consume the magazine. So that is obviously something that we are still mindful of. So we do want to return to print at some point. I'm also a bit old-fashioned in that I never ever want to see the death of print media. So hopefully if we can play a part in that. So we will return to print at some point. I think at that point it's also likely that we will probably return to members only access as well. But subscription for the magazine is less than £30 a year, I think. So it really is great value for what you get.
It's great value, and we still give priority access to the digital version of the magazine to members, don't we? So they're still seeing it first.
Yeah, that's right. So at the moment we give priority access to members and contributors. So they get kind of first viewing, if you like, and then usually roughly about a week later we're then putting it out to the public.
And as you say, £30 a year subscription is remarkable. Good value.
It's a bargain.
The latest issue of Children in Scotland magazine, which takes a closer look at the calls in our recently launched manifesto for 2021 to 2026, is available now on our website at www.childreninscotland.org.uk. Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Children in Scotland podcast. For more information about the work of our communications team, including the Children in Scotland magazine, and for all our other work, head to our website at childreninscotland.org.uk.